Hello, this is Dan Nowman Niswander, and you are watching The Nowman Show. And on the show this week, I have the host of the podcast Night Rule, Isaac Murdock from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Isaac, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing, Dan?
Well, I'm doing, all things considered, I always say I'm physically and mentally doing very well in these crazy times that we live in. And I think it's also very important for us to not only do self-care, but to touch base with others and ask them how they're doing. Very important.
Yeah, I think you gave the most legitimate, best possible answer anyone can give under the current kind of contemporary circumstances. I think ultimately, if anyone isn't adding a caveat such as, under the circumstances, I'm doing okay physically and mentally. I mean, all power to you, man. That's great to hear.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's, and every day I am grateful to be a musician and an artist, as well as somebody who can host a podcast. And, I started doing this show in 2015 because I realized the purpose of my work, whatever it is that I do, is to help create cultural and economic transition, because I could see our world, our society changing, our communities, everything, every part of it on every level is changing. And understanding history, I've seen how important culture is, even in my own life, how music, has played a tremendous part in my life from, as long as I can remember. I've been a musician. I was singing 5 years old in church, professionally, as a trained voice. And I'm assuming my parents taught me because I don't remember learning. And it's been an interesting journey, in every part of that along the way. Finally I got around to, doing it professionally, making a couple albums, doing a lot of shows, although I didn't get the tour really, but I did a lot of shows in the Indianapolis area. And also when I lived here in California, I did some. But I had to work for a living otherwise, so it was a part-time job, right? But I got some amazing stories, to tell, and a couple of great albums that I'm very, very proud of. And I wrote a book, along the way.
Can I ask you one question briefly?
Yeah.
Like, who are your musical influences, would you say?
Oh gosh, um, I've got so many. Do we have all night? um, Well, I can say I can answer that question in part by saying I've had a chance to meet or have face-to-face contact with some of my favorites that inspired me tremendously. Like when I was quite young, I had a face-to-face encounter with Freddie Mercury of Queen, and he's one of the few people, and I've met many, who I just froze. I didn't know what to say. Like there he is, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, right? But I did get a chance to have actual conversations with Brian May and John Deacon of Queen, and as well as I got to meet Paul McCartney. I got to have a conversation with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Hey, hold on.
So,
Let's
oh,
let's stop on Freddie Mercury really quick.
yeah.
So you met Freddie Mercury. Like, what were the exact circumstances under which you met Freddie Mercury, like rock god extraordinaire?
Well, I was at the time I was going to university in Norman, Oklahoma, the University of Oklahoma, and I talked my friends from high school that I was going to school with there into driving down to Dallas, Texas, to see the show there at the convention
How
center.
long how long of a drive is that from Oklahoma to Dallas? That's got to be at least like 4 or 5 hours. I have
Well,
no idea.
I would say that's probably right. Yeah. And so obviously we weren't going to drive back, although we had done that before, crazily, after a show. Um, so we arranged to have some fun, and we got a hotel room, and we found the Hilton Hotel, which was the closest to the convention center. And it was a great show. Obviously, I'd seen him before a couple of times, and so we were in the lobby. about 1:30 in the morning, here comes Freddie Mercury with a really big guy that looked like a bodyguard. And so basically, my friend and I, we found ourselves, we found ourselves like, oh, they left the elevator open, and we just kind of walked in, and the elevator closed, and all of a sudden, I'm realizing I'm standing almost right next to Freddie Mercury, and I just didn't know what to say. And they got off
Or
the elevator.
were you completely frozen in fear? I would have been frozen in terror.
See, the year after that, and 3 years after that, with also getting to talk to Brian May and to John Deacon in different places, and so actual real human conversations, where you can talk about just being a musician, which I did, and they totally respected me as that. And I, to this day, I think, my God, not only was their music profound to me, changed my life, but they were just regular human beings to me, treating me like a real person and not like a fan, which, like John Deacon even asked me, so what instrument do you play? I mean,
sure,
it was so cool. And well, there's more to that story, but I'll tell that later.
Hold on, before we move on from Queen, your top 3 Queen songs all time.
Oh my God,
it's tough, really tough to pick 3. I would think alone, but
Under Pressure.
Solid choice.
Is probably one of my all-time favorite songs of any genre, actually, because I also love David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I know his Piano Man as well. I've talked to him about that song. And see what else. One Vision probably is another one.
Oh, great choice. Yeah, I'm really glad you chose that, because I would have forgotten to, and I would have regretted it. So yeah, One Vision is an incredible song.
And Brighton Rock, and Now I'm Here. Bad Leroy Brown. Oh, there's just so many.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I would probably say I'm gonna go with Radio Gaga. I'm gonna go with Who Wants to Live Forever, because I love Highlander and the whole Highlander soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
And Don't Stop Me Now, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, there's really like 45.
The first time I saw Yes, I felt like I was in a whole nother world. The Going for the One tour was absolutely amazing. The song Awaken, I highly recommend that to anyone. Just heavenly, if there's such a word. And Peter Gabriel's World of Music, Arts, and Dance tour was a festival, an international festival of music and food and workshops, and it's just so much fun. I was there all day, and I didn't want to leave, and I wish it wouldn't end. You know what I mean?
Stevie Wonder, and you interviewed one of his producers.
Yes, Robert Margouleff's his name. He and his partner Malcolm Cecil were co-producers, co-engineers on 5 of Stevie's albums. Yeah, the Nowman Show. We've had a lot of stuff. I finally got around to performing myself, on the show, performing live, and eventually one of those tracks got me a gig on America's Got Talent in 2020, right before the pandemic. So that was an interesting experience. Got to sing in front of thousands of people on March the 7th of last year, 2020.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that just like a rush? Had you ever performed? Because you've been performing for a while, but that's got to be the biggest show you've ever done by a ways, right?
That's the biggest audience. I mean, I think the most I had is 1,000. But I got to sing in front of 2 different audiences that day, and I got to do my sound check in front of the afternoon show. And then the full house was already there, and then I performed for the judges in the audience in the evening, because they do 2 shows a day, and so I would say probably about 5,000 people that day, and then within 10 days we had the lockdown. So it was a very interesting but strange month, right? 2020. But
yeah, that blows. 2020. 2020 is going to become a meme for like just something being shitty, I think. Like, if they still have that show on ABC called 2020, they're going to have to rename it, because the 2020 brand, or like hindsight being 2020, we're not going to be able to say that anymore, because we're not going to want to hear the words 2020 anymore.
That's right. That's right. But we also have to acknowledge that this is the time in history too when we have a TV show here in the United States called Schitt's Creek.
That's true.
So I mean, it's. But Isaac, I know that you do this podcast, and you've had some very interesting people on your podcast. You've had from the David Feldman Show, which is how we connected.
Yeah.
You had one of the comedy writers from SNL. You've had scientists, professors.
Ben Burgess and
Ben Burgess,
Adnan Hussein, Professor Adnan Hussein. We had Napoleon de Legend. We had the guy from Trevor from Champagne Sharks, which is one of my all-time favorite podcasts. It's like a Black politics and culture podcast. It's just been very, very intelligent, very well done. I've been lucky enough to have Harvey J.K. It's been a lot of fun. I've been doing that for a while. If there's any hockey fans down there in LA that are into the Edmonton Oilers, they can also check out my my hockey podcast, Handkerchief Dynasty. That's like an Oilers fan podcast. It's kind of like if David Letterman had a hockey podcast, is basically what Handkerchief Dynasty is. It's a little irreverent, I remember actually, I was on the roof of a apartment building that I was just living in temporarily for like a month, a year before last. I was talking to my friend Brad about it on Skype. We're just like, we want to do this podcast. How are we going to do it in a way that we can, get behind and that has integrity and interests us? And he just said, man, we just got to Letterman this thing. And I was like, exactly. And then, that's been a lot of fun.
You're a big hockey fan, but what can I ask you what you do for work? What
I'm in the software industry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm actually in between gigs right now, but I'm hoping to be working again soon.
So you what led you to want to do Night Rule?
I enjoy long form conversations, and having done 100 episodes of a hockey podcast and having had a few stand-up comedians on and whatnot, and realizing that it's kind of difficult to have all the people you want to have on a show if it has to be about the Edmonton Oilers, because really that turns a lot of people off. The ones that are into it are really into it, but
that's right.
That's a small segment of the population. So I thought, I kind of from fairly early on, I thought I wanted to do a show that kind of allowed me to explore a lot of my own interests. I'm interested in a lot of different things, from history and philosophy to radical politics and media, literature, film, music, psychology. Really, if I figured if I could get people on and have conversations about all these things, maybe other people would find it interesting. So yeah, it's just started at Night Rule's only a few months old now, but it's already got about the same audience that the hockey podcast does now.
Oh, cool.
And that's been going on for a little over a year. So I'm hoping, because it's a little more general interest, it'll grow pretty well. Yeah. So people can check us out on Twitter. We're at PodRule, which is a pretty sweet handle, actually, at PodRule. And then if you just search for Night Rule Podcast, you'll be able to find us on all the major platforms. Yeah.
It's great to have a variety of interests, and that's what I realized with the Nowman Show also, is that say cultural and economic transition. So you can, for those who are interested in the Nowman Show, it's on YouTube. There's two different versions of it. The Nowman Show on the Arroyo Channel, ARROYO, on YouTube. That's basically what broadcasts on the Arroyo Channel here in the Los Angeles area and beyond. But we now also stream on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV in real time when that's going on. And then, of course, the other YouTube channel is just called the Nowman Show. That's the grassroots version. It's got lots of guests, including what we talked about. And you can also reach me at Niswander, NISWANDER, on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook, Insta Nowman. I'm on TikTok. It's whatever works to get the word out. And so now we have a lot in common, actually, as far as having a variety of different content on our shows. What would you say so far has been your favorite episode or episodes?
Well, I mean, this is a good segue for me in terms of self-promotion, because one of my favorites is actually one of our only premium episodes. I've made 2 episodes premium on Patreon. And I recorded about an hour and 20 minutes with Ben Burgess, and we mostly just talked about science fiction. We talked about a bunch of our favorite original Twilight Zone episodes, our favorite episodes of the original Twilight Zone series. And I was inspired with that episode. I really like a podcast called The Movies That Made Me with Joe Dante, who directed Gremlins, and then I'm forgetting the other co-host's name. He's also a director, but it's a great podcast, and they'll edit in audio from like whatever like B movie they're talking about, whatnot, or whatever movie they're talking about, and I really enjoy that format. So I edited in some audio from Twilight Zone, and it was just super fun to talk to Ben about that. He's a really intelligent guy, so I'm probably going to be unlocking that just so more people can listen to it in the future. But if people want to check it out now, they can definitely go to patreon.com/nightrule and sign up to become a night ruler. And we'd love to have you. We're having a lot of fun. I have mixtapes up there too for people that are into music. I cut together some of my favorite kind of. I'm really into like 70s and 80s Japanese music.
Oh, cool.
So there's some mixtapes. I'm putting mixtapes up for patrons of some of my favorite stuff, and yeah, that's also a lot of fun.
I taught English in Japan in the 80s, and I bought a 45 single. I don't know where it's at. I gotta find that. I think one of my former roommates has my 45 still. I gotta find it, but I bought a pop single from.
I have fantasies
the
of going
late
to
80s.
Japan record stores and just like dropping like a mint, just buying like all this stuff because a lot of it's kind of still hard to find out here. Like I think a lot of people know YMO, which they were kind of my gateway.
Oh yeah,
But there's
I
a
love
really
YMO.
great, yeah. There's the Hosono, Arumi Hosono is the one of the guys from that. Obviously, with Sakamoto Ryuichi and
Yes.
Yukihiro Takahashi are they're both amazing. But Hosono, he's like produced like more albums than like he could possibly remember, and he's collaborated with so many different people, and when you just hear like all these great collaborations with all kinds of different great musicians, it's just yeah, he's another one too,
And Yellow Magic Orchestra were way ahead of their time.
Totally.
And just
It's like Giorgio Moroder, Kraftwerk, and then like them, back in like the late 70s, and Devo too. We got to talk about Devo next time we get on mic a lot, I think, because people need to know about Devo. These are important cultural artifacts.
Oh, they're amazing. I mean, Robert actually produced my favorite album of theirs, which is Freedom of Choice.
Sure.
And we talked mostly though about Stevie and about technology, but I tried to get him to talk more about Devo, but that wasn't where his attention was at, I guess, at that time. So, but
I had a pot dealer once years ago who told me this story. It was like he had a friend who was like obsessed with Devo. He lived in Vancouver, Canada, and he was like, "Man, I'm gonna drive down to California and just like try and find like Devo and just talk to them. I'm just gonna go." And they were like, "Oh, you're crazy, man. You've lost your mind." And so he drives down the coast to California because he finds some mailing address. Apparently, they have some office, And he goes down there, and like he just goes to the front desk or whatever, and he's like, I want to meet Devo or whatever." And they were like, "Oh yeah, just wait a minute." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, they'll see you now." So like he just like went in, he just met Devo. They just sat with him for a little bit and just talked to him, and he just met Devo. So he comes back up the coast to Vancouver, and he tells his friends, he's like, "Dude, like I drove down and I actually met, like, it was like Casale and Mothersbaugh."
wow.
And they just talked to me for like 50 minutes, and they're like, "Are you kidding? That's crazy." So they drive down months later, and they went to lunch. They all went to lunch. So I actually have this fantasy. I have this fantasy about meeting Mark Mothersbaugh.
Yeah, I at some point, yeah, I'd like to get him on the show, and because we'd have a lot to talk about. And I talked to him on the phone once a long time ago, but when I was working a job for a professional audio company, I was a front desk person, I was taking messages and is so and so there? And he says, yes, may I have your name? And he said, Mark Mothersbaugh.
Son of a.
Yeah, and I thought, I better, part of me wanted to talk, but I had to stay professional,
Sure.
But
That's a nice brush with greatness, though. That's even better than the time I stole a car battery from the Prodigy. That's a big deal. No, I steal all my jokes from Peep Show.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about the issues of caring about our fellow man and women, and showing more compassion and dealing with short and long term solutions for the many problems that we are facing in our world right now. And I would like to also talk to you about Occupy real briefly here.
Yeah, totally.
I think Occupy 2.0, Occupy Wall Street, I should say, 2.0 happened this past week with the short stock sales, connected with Robinhood and Citadel and all of that. And every part of what happened there was more exposure of the fraudulent, illegal behavior that goes on in the financial sector. And even though this was, for those of us that remember the original Occupy Wall Street, I mean, this is one of the things that lured us to help create that movement, was this very kind of thing. But now here in 2021, it's coming full circle again for millions more people to actually see it in real time. This is the financial structure of what goes on. This is the revolving door, right? Because Janet Yellen, who was the head of the Federal Reserve Bank, is now head of the U.S. Treasury Department, right? She was recently paid $800,000 to speak at Citadel, one of the big Wall Street players that owns Robinhood.
$800,000, yeah, $800,000, yeah.
So you can see that's just one example of how this revolving door works, and for them, it's completely legal and normal, right? The American people need to understand.
Quick aside. Do you think anyone giving a speech? Do you think that's the $800,000? Is that appropriate remuneration for any speech? Like, could any speech be so good that it would be worth $800,000? Like, it's legalized bribery, basically.
Well, that's basically what it is. I mean, Barack Obama got 6 figures. Hillary Clinton got 6 figures for speaking to Wall Street banks. So this is, I mean, obviously people don't spend this kind of money just like humongous campaign contributions. They don't spend this kind of money without wanting something in return. That's how it goes. I mean, this is what people need to understand. I mean, in this country, we have what's called the Supreme Court law, Citizens United, that basically has opened the floodgates of money in the political system. And, the American people just, also seem to be very afraid of being politicized, and they're in denial about so many things. It's time to come full circle with this, or this will just get out of hand. And I think, we have a decision to make. Do we want to go more towards FDR type of policies or not? Because if we don't, it's going to be fascist. There's really no gray area. And I think that's becoming pretty apparent as well. But when the average American seems to be afraid of change, and somehow FDR is radical, and the person that the average American that feels that way is also, to me, very ignorant of history. Because Social Security came out of that, unemployment insurance came out of that. We had 2 very successful job programs. The government created like 15 million jobs that were decent paying jobs at that time.
It's not, I mean, I think on the face of it, and it's kind of funny because I'm constantly right now thinking about how the left and people who are progressive, or people who just believe in basic human decency, move forward, when obviously in America, like the myth of bipartisanship is dead at this point. So, I mean, how do you actually get people from that side? How do you peel off votes and convince people? And I think you do it by saying, like, look, it's like healthcare is not, people having healthcare is not radical. It's an investment in our entire economy and our society as a whole. People having education is not radical. People having a decent standard of living and dignity, these are not radical things. And I think ultimately, if we focus on that core kind of message, I think it's going to be surprising how many people get on board.
Well, absolutely, you're absolutely right, and that's why thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk, because getting perspectives from outside the country, outside the United States, is very important for people here in the United States, because they don't understand that there are different perspectives out there. there are different perspectives on economic systems. There are different perspectives on, like you were saying, with healthcare. Every so-called civilized country in the world has a universal healthcare plan because it's more, it's affordable.
Cheaper. It's cheaper
That's
for
right.
everybody. Give me a break.
That's
Like
right.
it's like it'll. Don't
And
even
we
get me
have
started. Yeah.
we have a military budget that is almost $1 trillion, and it's been since 2003, and that's a whole nother conversation. It's been almost $1 trillion each year, and yet we can't afford universal health care. Bernie Sanders was drilled over and over and over again. Well, how do you pay for it, Bernie? And yet there was no problem getting $700 trillion, $700 billion or $400 billion each year. It seemed like it would increase. And the average American doesn't have a critical thought about any of this, and yet we've have to be distracted by Twitter, from Donald Trump or whatever it is. And now, because Trump is gone, the establishment's scrambling to find ways to distract people. Literally, they're scrambling to find that because with Trump it was easy. They could just direct people to Twitter or all the time. Now he's not around. Now they have to be more creative and find ways to distract people. But the bottom line is, we've got to start solving these problems for the 99%. And I think we had two major events in January. We had the storming of the Capitol, and then we had the Robin Hood, allowing the little guy to get into the stock market and benefit, with buying shorts, or I should say renting shorts. Some people were able to take the $600, the checks that, that they got at the end of the year and invest, like say if they would take one guy got $40,000, he took all his family's checks, right, and did some investing in this and made $40,000. And it angered, some of the billionaires. One of them was even on CNBC complaining. These people just want to hurt want to hurt the rich people. Like, what? Yeah. I mean, it just shows. You could see the fear in his face, though. I mean, they're really worried that, okay, you want to open up the stock market to the average person, and now you've done it, and you don't like it because they're taking money away from you. Or in your mind, when they have every right to, I should say, rent out that stock in this case, as you do. So,
sure,
it's a very, and this got exposed to more and more people now, just like, the George Floyd thing, at the time people were going home and actually turning on their TV and seeing this, you know what I mean? It's like more and more people are getting exposed to what's really out there. And what's next is the question, and
what's next is we start a rock band to bring down the band, to stick it to the man. Listen, I gotta go though, but it's been so nice talking to you, dude. And yeah, let's hit more on politics and stuff, because there's so many issues to talk about these days. The next time we get on mic, okay?
Absolutely. And anybody's interested, I have two albums. One is called Revolution of the Heart. The second one is called Adventures in Wonderland. You can get those on iTunes. We'll continue the conversation, cultural and economic transition. We can talk about worker co-ops. We can talk about Democratic Socialists of America. We can talk about movement building, and basically, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it, dude. You have a nice night, okay?
Thanks so much, Isaac Murdock.
Yeah, thank you.
Night Rule Podcast on the Nowman Show. This is Dan Nowman Niswander. Stay present in the moment, always.
Talk to you soon.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.